Hey everyone, my name is Joe Hain and I want to take some time today to talk about grief. It's something that I am unfortunately very familiar with after I lost my wife, Jessica Marie, back in 2014. And my journey over these past few years has been, I think, a very profound one, where I came to kind of a divide in my road where I had to determine if I was going to continue trying to live in an old capacity or if I had to dramatically and drastically change the way I perceived my life to try to help free me from the agony that grief had enveloped me within. And I learned so much about myself, and my journey was very different than many others, and I was blessed with opportunity to do some very profound things. But along that journey, I picked up some tips, some benefits that I'd like to share with you all today, especially those who are navigating grief right now and navigating through a difficult time. So when I'm speaking of grief, I'm not speaking of just the kind of day-to-day stuff that someone may or may not be traversing, such as just unhappy with your job or going through a rough time with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or can't figure out what you want to do with school and career-wise. It's more of that catastrophic grief when we experience such a loss, such as losing a child, a spouse, a dramatic and very horrible separation, a divorce, and possibly the end of a dream job or a business you may have started. Something to that weight, where it is consuming, where you're thinking about it and it's affecting your everyday life and seeping into every facet of your life, and you're wearing a smile but it's not genuine, and it's something that really affects you in every capacity, and then affects those that you love and your work and your just every component of your life. And that's the time where we need this help. And some people always say, well, my grief won't compare to your grief because you lost your wife, your soulmate. And that stuff used to almost make me feel better sometimes, because they would equate my grief being more challenging than their own. And over time, I see that it's all the same, because it's a struggle. And it's probably the greatest struggle that you may be navigating. And if I can lift 10 pounds and you can lift 100 pounds, and we both add 20% to that capacity, who struggles more? From the outside, it looks like you're struggling a lot more because you've got 120 pounds that you're bearing. Or for me, it's only 12. But if that's the furthest extent I know of my struggle, then it doesn't matter. So grief has that effect. If you lose your cat, and that is the worst and most horrible, horrific thing that has ever happened to you, then who am I to say, well, I lost my wife, so that really doesn't compare now, does it? It doesn't equate. It doesn't matter. So whatever you're navigating through, if it's grievous to you and you're lamenting and you're in a suffering and sorrowful state a lot of your day, then you are grieving. It happens to kind of fall into certain guidelines and parameters that these are more catastrophic losses, but that doesn't mean that yours doesn't fall within that. Then this video or the resources and everything I'm going to speak about today aren't for you. So you determine whether it's helpful. But grief is enveloping, and it's a difficult entity to wrap one's mind and being around. But it starts with, for me, it was beauty. People wanted to talk to me and people wanted to give advice, and I went and saw a counselor for, I think, 2 sessions, maybe 1.5, because I ended the second one pretty early. It wasn't enough. I was, furious and just enveloped in agony, and speaking to somebody can help, but it helps to purge the emotions. But that's a temporary answer. It's a temporary solution, because in time that emotion will return and build up, and you just kind of have to keep speaking to somebody, and that will help over time, absolutely. And I wholly recommend that if that's a resource that you see helps you. But there are other applications and things to consider which will provide, for me at least, a more sustainable foundation on how to understand my grief. And through doing that, I basically negated its existence, and it was just organically and naturally crowded out from my being. It wasn't just like I hit a stop button. It was little by little by little, I was filling my life, my being, my reality with more beauty. And within me, there's a limited amount of storage, of capacity. And I didn't have room for it. It was just too much love, too much beauty that resided within, and grief had no place. It's a beautiful state. It's a wonderful feeling. It was a tremendously difficult and liberating journey to come to this place, but I'm here, and I want to share it with those that may benefit, because I know how hard your struggle is, and I know how difficult it seems, and there's nowhere to turn. So that's kind of what I want to speak about today. And I teach now, and I speak to different people about different things, and if somebody is grieving, it's a completely different conversation than if somebody is just trying to perceive their life in a certain way that will bring more joy and peace and serenity. Grief is war. It's war. And if I'm gonna go into a battle zone and somebody is just in the thick of a war, I'm not gonna be like, you need to meditate more, and you need to do a little bit more yoga every day, and everything will be okay. And also read a few of these quotes. They're very helpful. You're in agony. You lost your leg. You're bleeding out. You are in dire agony when you're in grief, and you need something strong enough to pull you out. One of my resources was, and I don't mind sharing this, I think it's a beautiful thing, was that I was receiving signs and messages from my beloved wife, from wherever she was and is. And that really helped kind of usher in a different perception of, well, if she's not here, but she's somewhere else, and she's able to flesh my existence with love, with beauty, with guidance, then there is a point to being here. And for me, that kind of liberated me from the grip of death, understanding that I didn't really believe in it in the capacity that I used to. So I am and was extremely blessed to have that. But maybe somebody's going through a separation, or they lost their job, and you're not going to have that guidance for you. So there was another thing in the beginning which was very powerful for me, was just existing and residing in nature. And the thing is that grief is so ugly that we need beauty to remind us of God, of love, of the universe, of source, of an existence beyond the agony that we're navigating through. And for me, it was nature. I would spend every day by the ocean, catching in sunsets, trekking through the wilderness, existing on hikes, and just living, breathing, ingesting the beauty of nature. I had to get out of my own mind, urban environments, and I didn't want to be around people, because being around people reminded me of what I didn't have. It was kind of like highlighting my loss in a sense, but nature, it was not the sense. And the thing is that this is something that is going to be very powerful for you, but again, it's just like seeking therapy. You can't just reside in nature unless you become a hermit and a monk and then go do that. And if that's for you, great. But for a lot of us, it's not an option. So it's something that I believe is highly powerful and beneficial for you to go in and just exist within whatever natural element you can and surround yourself in that. But again, that's a purge. It's something to remind you of God's grace, the beauty of our life. So you can incorporate that, but the sustainability is not going to be of something that's going to last. And so there was another something to consider that I found very beneficial. Again, these are little pillars that you add up and you're able to kind of support your evolution, the transcendence of your understanding of grief, but it was volunteering with others. So when I would go travel the world after I lost Jess, I would basically try to sign up with different organizations to diversify my volunteering experience. And what I would do is I'd work with children mainly and impoverished areas when I would be traveling through South America, Central America, and Asia and whatnot. But when you see that others have big, vibrant, beautiful, radiant smiles upon their faces and they're living in circumstance that you thought was impossible to exist within, and yet they are embodying joy and love and beauty, it is refreshing. And it shows you that, you know what? My own grief is a perspective, which is very personalized, but it is mine. And I need to step outside my perspective to see that others too grieve and others too exist in beauty and love, and they are not encumbered by it. They don't dwell within it because their perspective is as such that they are happy and joyous and finding love within their reality no matter the circumstance. So I would volunteer with children, especially with animals, which was super fun. I had monkeys crawling up my arms and neck and basically pooping on my head and peeing on my head, so we had to wear the towels. That was in Costa Rica. Volunteering with elephants in India, tigers and lions in Dubai, and that was fun because you're seeing the beauty of that. But when you see it with children, with other people, teaching women in abusive relationships self-defense, teaching children English, it just all these different in these different capacities. If you're able to do this, it shows you that your limited perspective is just that, is that you're living in somewhat of a bubble, and grief is just a whirlwind within that, and it's refreshing to step outside of that and see somebody else's world, and not just, you know, a neighbor down the street. That is extremely helpful to talk to others too, but to see it where it is a very large contrast to your own reality is because we are very blessed to live in America. Many of us, I'm a white dude in America. Like, I've got a lot of benefits to myself, and that's why I go out and try to realize what else is going on in the world, because it helps sustain me. It helps evolve my soul and spirit so that I can try to help and give back, because I am blessed to be living this life. And so volunteering is huge, and you don't have to travel to South America to do so. You can go to homeless shelters. You can go to work with seniors in senior citizen homes. There's so many different capacities where you can do it, and it's within your community, but it helps to give back. Again, that is not sustainable. It is one piece of the puzzle. So you're basically chipping away at grief, but this is very monumental. And especially if you can get to a place through your grief where you might be able to help others that are navigating the beginning chapters of their existence through that trying time, that is super beneficial as well. So the last thing that I found very impactful, and again, this was a blessing, but I don't know that we all can do it, is to travel. is to step outside your comfort zone, to push your limitations, to experience new cultures, new geographic locations, new ways of life, new ways of faith, different and expanded considerations that will help empower you, to show you that your perspective is limited and that there's a whole world out there that is just waiting to be seen and waiting to be experienced, and that you can go do that. And it's very fun and entertaining and comical and adventurous to go travel with your best friends and your family. But I think a solo trip, a road trip to start 3 hours away and staying 2 nights or whatever it may be, something that where you can go experience life on your own without variables outside of that, to kind of help you expand in all the ways that I'm speaking about, to push your limitations, to expand the way you are perceiving your world, so that you can step outside the small bubble that is grief. So experiencing the different cultures and different faiths, and listening and talking and helping and making friends with complete strangers from all over the world, it's empowering stuff. It shows you how small your world is, and as you see how small your world is, your grief gets smaller along with it. And it helps to realize that there are other people all over the world who suffer in different capacities, and I'm not alone in this. And that observance, that truth, is liberating in and of itself, because you see that I'm not alone, and that's refreshing. It's helpful to see that I'm one of many, and my circumstance, my particular situation, is one of few, possibly, because there's no one like you traversing your journey and navigating your path. But there are others in similar scenarios and situations, and other ones outside of that may just be able to speak some love and life into your life, but they're not down the hallway of your condo complex. They're not, down a cubicle at your work. It's somewhere you have to expand outwards. And one thing I've been noticing a lot lately is that I talk about this kind of spiritual stuff with everybody I can, and it seems that everybody wants to talk about it, but they're afraid to, because they think people are going to think they're weird or whatnot. And I'm not speaking just in the religious capacity of kind of discussing the nuances of your faith, whatever that may be, but the fact that we're able to kind of heal together, that we're vulnerable, that we are imperfect. We're not the social media version of ourselves, but one that is flawed and sometimes hurt and suffering and scared and fearful and angry and impatient and whatnot. But that to communicate with one another, to have words of truth shared, to have conversations of depth, to ask somebody how they're doing, but to listen and not just giving that fake, I'm great, how are you? Oh, things are great. Great. How was the new year? Oh, it's good. How was yours? Good. Good luck. Best wishes. To have, it was good, but I suffered a little bit. I had a little bit of trial when there was a pocket. I just really missed Jess. And I used to go back and kind of recall what we used to do together on New Year's, and it made me a little sad. But then I started to remember that it wasn't about what I lost, but what I gained, that I had those times with her. And it was a nice point of growth for me, that I saw what my mind was doing. It's trying to kind of pull me into what wasn't, and I had to reaffirm what was and what is. And to have a conversation like that and share that with somebody may help them. It's not just for us sometimes, helping others, just like the volunteering. It's a cyclical kind of reward and benefit, is that we are helping them, but the act of doing so provides nourishment for our spirit. It's sustaining, because you're doing something good, and that feeling too helps chip away at the grief. So it's little things like this that you're adding all together, sometimes big things, but traveling, volunteering, existing within nature are just some things that we can do to help chip away at the ugliness of grief by saturating our life with beauty. So those are some things that I found very beneficial, but now it comes to a little bit larger of a pill to swallow, a little bit harder to swallow, is that grief is in essence a byproduct of our desires. If a child wants a piece of candy and doesn't get it, they may throw a tantrum. And that is the byproduct of them desiring something and not getting it. Grief is that times a billion. It's something that we held on to so tightly, so profoundly so that it was a part of us and that we lost it. And so we lost a part of ourselves. When I first lost Jess, I didn't realize it, but over time in the beginning, she was my wife, my business partner, my best friend, soulmate. She was all those things and more in current time, but she was also in the future mother of my children, the future business partner, the future grandparent, the future old ass lady on the porch next to me, both rocking chairs away. It wasn't just this, what is she now? What will she be? And what will I be? So I not only had to let go of who she was as a person in that moment, but who she was going to become to me, because I was creating this perfect life, this fantasy, this kind of delusion of what my life would be with her. So I had to bury, in a sense, a future, but not just of Jess, but of myself. I had all of those identities invested in her as a person. So it was more than just her being a best friend and a spouse and a future parent and a business owner and a best friend. I was all of those things to her. So all of those identities had to be buried as well. But yet here I am, existing, living and breathing without her and without that identity. So in that moment, I saw that I would never be a future husband with Jess. I would never be a future grandfather with Jess or future father with Jess here. So I was, throughout my life, and society kind of molds us to live our lives this way, was investing in all these identities. And all of these identities equated to value. Value to who? Well, to myself, so that I could show society that I am important and that I have value and that I'm impressive. So it was for myself to showcase and prove to others. And all that is, frankly, bullshit. It doesn't exist. It's just something we do because we're battling insecurities and we have to find this self-value. But through grief, it was very difficult. If you go, I went through a very difficult breakup when I was young. And that was the hardest thing I experienced then, just like that weightlifting analogy. It was the hardest thing I knew because I was so proud of being a boyfriend and so in love with the idea of us together and us together in the future. So I didn't only grieve the loss of the person. I think actually, looking back upon it, I grieved more of the loss of the idea of being in this great relationship. Because at the end, I didn't even like her that much because she turned into a different person that I was not meshing with energy-wise, which is perfectly fine. But it took me a while to grieve and get over, not her, the idea of me being with her, the fulfilling aspect of being a boyfriend, of having this beautiful girl to show around and show, hey, well, I've got this, I'm important. So it was more of a hit on my insecurities than it was anything else. And it's the same thing with Jess. It wasn't the loss, and this was magnified 100, 1,000-fold, whatever it may be. It wasn't the loss of just Jess. It was the loss of all the investment I placed into my identities. And that was very liberating to realize that I had to still live and breathe and go to work and eat and sleep and do everything I had to do without those identities. And if I was able to do that, then did they really exist in the first place? And they didn't. I figured that out, but through the hard way. And it's the same thing if we're going through a catastrophic loss as losing our dream job. It's because we invested so much value in holding that position. If we're going through a breakup, a separation, a divorce, a lot of the difficulty, it's not the betrayal, it's not the separation and the loss of just that person. Sometimes it is the loss of that identity that we have invested in so deeply, so that it is like a living, breathing component of us. And now we had to let that go, and we had to bury that. And that is extremely difficult, but it doesn't exist. We've created it. We set the parameters for that identity. And then when we started to begin to live outside of that, that's where the grief just kind of flowed in and would steal the joy and love from our life. So it's tough to consider. And for me, it's something that was very helpful in understanding that I can start perceiving the loss of Jessica, but I don't need to invest in the loss of my identities, because they are a fallacy. They are a make-believe component that I invested in so much so, and I had no idea I was doing it then, that it was because I was feeling my insecurities. And not only that, I was boastful, almost like prideful of being this person and being these identities. But again, I was lacking self-love. I was lacking the true confidence of knowing that no matter what, I love myself, and that I'm not concerned with society's perspective of me. And that comes down to being loved ones, friends, near and dear, and what have you. But it took a while for me to understand that and to get there. I'm doing the Cliff's Notes version for you here, but that path was a long, winding one, and it was very beneficial to come to these realizations, but it took a lot of time. It took a lot of resources. So I had to start understanding what was the huge component that was ushering my grief into my existence on a regular basis. And that was a big part. And it stems further than that. It is more than just the identities, but it's also expectations. So this is something I talk a lot about with people that I help counsel, teach, whatever, is that attachment to life. So we come to desire certain things, certain situations, certain events, a certain level of existence within our life. And that is always going to bond us into suffering, into sorrow. The Buddha said it is that desire is the root of all suffering. And there's a mental component and a spiritual component, two different kind of pillars of existence that are the only two that I can see that really are there, that affect us beyond emotional and physical. And with the mind and the ego, and if you've read some other resources, the thinking mind is just our mind, how it narrates and realizes our life, but that fuels desire. It says, well, I want to have the successful job and the nice house and the white picket fence and the great car and the little kids who are all well behaved and make good income. And that dream, that realization, is something that sometimes we pursue so much so that when our life falls outside of that perfect dream, the suffering comes. It's okay to pursue that, but not be invested in the outcome of your pursuits. I know that sounds tricky and kind of confusing, but I make the analogy as if I am trekking up Everest and I know that I have to be at the top of that mountain. That's where my pursuit lies within. That's my goal, is that I am going to trek up that mountain, but without expectancy. I'm going to work towards summiting that mountain, but not expecting to summit that mountain. Because my path may change, my route may be altered throughout my way, and that I realize that it's not the summit that equates my success arriving there. It's each step pursuing the summit. So one step after the next, I am realizing success. I am summiting in each step. That was a big component with my grief, is that it wasn't just the passing of Jess, it was all of my desire to have this perfect life with a beautiful wife and children and the white picket fence and the house and the cars and the successful job and vacations and all that stuff. And along with her passing, all of that fantasy just went right with her. It was the desire of my mind that that's the way my life needed to be. Instead of just working towards something and being grateful and blessed in each moment, it was always, what's next? What's next? Got this? Next. Got this? Next. Got this? Next. And losing her was such a big setback in everything that it wasn't just a setback. It was that the dream, the delusion, the illusion of perfection was done. It died along with her. So that was catastrophic for me. But now I won't allow myself to do that. So with grief, we have to understand that we invest, we place so much importance in this perfection, in this idea of this is what our life is, because we're saying that we have to be on that summit to be successful instead of pursuing it. If you lose your spouse, it's not what you lost, it's what you had. If you go through a divorce, it's not that your life together is no longer a possibility. It's what was the beauty within your life? What did you share? Our mind has a very clever way of highlighting the ugly, the quote-unquote bad. I mean, there's two columns. There's beautiful and ugly. There's not right and wrong and good and bad. Our mind will focus on the ugly and not highlight the good. And if you're perceiving your life in that measure, how will you ever see the good and the beauty and the love? I remember caring for Jessica, like literally carrying her throughout my parents' house, helping to feed her, to bathe her, to take her to the bathroom, to help her stand. I felt like the knight in shining armor, and I believe I was that for her. And so many instances, and time after time, 1,000 of them. But there would be a few missteps where I lost my temper and I yelled at her. I was just encumbered by the possibility of mortality, of all of the anxiety and pressure and panic and worry and ER visits, and it was so life and death on the line that I lost it. I don't judge that person. I know that he was doing the best he could, but after she passed, my mind wanted to highlight those instances of me losing my temper 2, 3, 4 times, whatever it was, and not the thousands of beautiful moments of beauty. And I had to realize that that's bullshit. That's not fair. How am I just going to dismiss all of this beauty and not come into the place where I can't judge that man with all of my added experience and knowledge and everything? Here I am going to sit there and judge a man who didn't have all this resource, who didn't have all this life experience now, doing the best he could. But we do that on a regular basis with any relationship, is that, well, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, what have you, my husband, wife, spouse, companion, let's highlight the bad. Let's not look at the good. And if you're going through anything like that and you're grieving upon it, how blessed were you to have them for the time you did? That was a big factor for me, is that it wasn't the loss of Jess, it was the gain of her for the time I did have her, and all the smiles and laughs and love we created. And that is fulfilling, that is sustaining, and you're adding that perception, and you have to actually change the way your mind functions. But that, with nature, with volunteering, with traveling, with reading and meditating and praying, all these things start adding up. And it starts leading and chipping away little by little towards your liberation from grief, because you don't have room for it. You're seeing, oh my God, my life is saturated with love, and that's filling your existence, and it's crowding out the grief. Which leads me to one other pillar. It's the physical pillar. I did go through a very rough time where I was bedridden, and to be perfectly honest, it was in Bolivia. I was at the brink of suicide. Not in the sense where I was about to do it, but I was either going down this path that would lead to it in some capacity, whether it was drinking or doing drugs till I basically didn't exist, or killing myself in some facet, or completely figuring out how to live my life in a different perspective, because I couldn't live it like this, otherwise I would go down that path. And I came to this choice, this decision, and thank God I chose the latter, to completely change and alter the way that I was living my life. And I didn't know what that looked like or whatever it did, but I knew that I had to begin. But that when I was bedridden, I was very, very sick in Bolivia. I didn't have nourishment, all this stuff. And I realized that being physically sound is a pillar, it's a foundational platform for me to invest in my spiritual and mental growth. And that I needed to go to the gym, I needed to do yoga, I needed to lift weights, I needed to run, I needed to swim, I needed to hike, to keep my body, and I know it's kind of a cliche metaphor, but keep my temple sound, so that I can invest in all of that stuff without having to have another consideration. And I know it's easy to say, be like, yeah, well, you're grieving, go eat right. Go hit the gym. I know that you just lost your child or your spouse, but go for a nice run. Shut up. I get it. It's like, dude, get out of my face with that shit. But it helps as one of the blocks of the foundation. It serves a purpose. So if you can, eating healthy, living a healthy lifestyle is not the solution. It's another component to help usher in that beauty, that love. Because when you feel good, you're able to perceive the good in your life. If I feel like shit, I'm gonna highlight the shit in my life. And that's not a very fun place to be. That's not a very great state to exist within, because I'm angry and annoyed and impatient and groggy and tired and everything, instead of in this state where, yeah, I am healthy and I can perceive the love and beauty in my life because I feel good, at least in that. At least I've got that going for me, because my emotions are all over the damn place and I'm super pissed and envious and bitter. But I could go run and swim and everything, so that helps. So you're just doing things that help. So it acts as a pillar. And the other one is emotions. So I'll touch on this briefly. We're gonna be an emotional roller coaster through grief. That's expected. But again, emotions are a byproduct of our desires. I'll make this a little bit clearer. So say if I'm very sad, sorrowful, regretful, it's because those emotions are invested to a past reality, one in which I wish I could change. And that's why I'm experiencing that. If I'm angry, impatient, annoyed, irritated, those emotions are tethered to a current reality, something. I'm driving in traffic, what the shit, it's all bumper, bumper to bumper, I'm pissed. That emotion is a byproduct of me not wanting to be in that situation. If I am anxious and panicked and worried, it's because I'm reacting emotionally to a future reality that could be, I need to get a great score on this exam. I need this job interview to fall through. Where are my children? They're not home yet. I'm worried about what's going on. This is a future, what could happen. So all those are emotions that are tethered to our desires, our attachment, and our expectation. And we have to realize that expectation, it's going to tether us to grief, to emotions. So when you realize that you're experiencing any of those emotions, you stop and ask yourself, what am I expecting? What do I want right now? With grief, it's different. You're always going to want your loved one, but you have to literally change the way that you're perceiving your life to see that I had them, not that I don't have them. Or I had the dream job, I had the great marriage, not that I don't now, but I did, and I was blessed to be in that space, to have that for the time that I had that, whatever it was. But again, emotions in the current moment, they're attached to your desires. So when you order food and it doesn't come out the right way, and you're upset and annoyed or whatever, well, why were you expecting your food to be perfect? Why were you expecting the waiter to get your order right? Why were you expecting not to be in rush hour traffic? It's just that we kind of paint these parameters of life and say whenever it falls outside of that, that's when we become emotional. And to make that observance of how your mind works will liberate you little by little by little. You're actually changing the way you perceive your reality. So that when you order food and it doesn't come out the way that you ordered, you go, who promised me that it would? And every time it's going to be you. And the more times you do this, you'll see that life isn't going to unfold the way you want. So just kind of ride that wave and enjoy it for what it is and find the beauty. When I'm teaching people meditation, I always tell them, pretend you're going down this stream, and that it's just this beautiful forest river, and that you're not in a boat, but you are the boat. And every time that you try to go against the current, you're not attending to your current reality, and that brings in suffering. That brings in an emotional reaction because you're angry or worried or stressed or sad and sorrowful because you're trying to change the current of life instead of just surrendering to that current and enjoying the beauty that comes in. And you're gonna see ugly things, but you're gonna see a lot of beautiful things too. And you can teach your mind to highlight the beauty, because in my particular situation, it's a lot more abundant than the ugly. And I've trained my mind to perceive so, but it all happened because of Jessica's passing. So another thing I wanted to touch upon is some resources that have helped me. I've read hundreds of books since her passing and spent thousands of hours within meditation and learned dozens of techniques. Not everybody has that opportunity. So there's a few things that I think are very important, and you're just adding these pillars to your battle with grief to envelop your life, to infuse your life with beauty. I always speak about how important meditation is. It's a tough cookie when you're really grieving hard. You don't want to sit there and be quiet and meditate when you're so, pardon my language, so fucking pissed at the world. And you're so in agony with the hand that you've been dealt. So I get it. It's very difficult. So what I do is I have to purge my emotion, because that anger, that regret, that impatience, that annoyance, and everything, I need to get rid of that for a moment so that I can be with myself, not with my emotion. So I can spend time with my true self and start reflecting, start observing, start unraveling what is tethering me to all of this grief. So going in nature, volunteering, traveling, these kinds of things, spending quality time with loved ones, praying is an emotional purge. And then you're able to meditate. Go work out, go run, do that, and then invest in meditation. The reason we meditate is not just because it's peaceful and calmful. The reason I tell people to do it is because this is a practice in awareness. Okay? So we have to be aware of how our mind functions so that we can live from our heart. I believe that our hearts are guided by Source, by God, by the universe, by angels. One of mine is a beautiful Lebanese girl that is up there now, and she helps guide me through my reality, through my heart, not through my mind. Meditation is a practice in awareness of my heart. So I always make this analogy because I love it and I think I'm so clever too. So there's that, is that our heart is tethered to Source, to God, to a higher perspective. It's a GPS, okay? So when you're driving in your car and you're not looking at the GPS, but you're listening to the GPS, there is no screen for you to look at. So you have to look, Joe, take a left in 50 meters, and I take a left. Now head straight for 200 meters. So I'm listening to that and letting that guide me along my path, okay? Because it has a higher perspective. It sees where I came from, it sees where I am, and it knows where I'm going, and it knows what obstacles lie ahead. And some of those I have to traverse, and some of them I have to avoid, hopefully so, but I don't know that. It does. But this is my GPS. This is the audio that tells me where to go, when to turn, and how to do so. But my mind is the radio. It's the radio in the car, and we're going to turn it all the way up to max, and then we're going to change the station every 3 seconds. So we hear Latina music, and then country, and then classical, and then talk radio, and then rap and rock and whatnot, and it's incessant. And it's going, and it's bringing in anxiety, and it's bringing in anger, and bringing in worry, and bringing in suffering and sadness and irritation and all the emotional hardships that one can experience. And we need to learn how to turn that mind off so that we can listen to our GPS. And that can take us to where we need to be. And that route will change. And that Everest might change too. But if we act in the accord of guiding our lives from our heart and not from our mind, I don't have to worry about it. When you're driving, you're listening to your GPS. Are you pulling out maps, figuring out where you need to go, when you need to stop, do this, do that, all the stress that's entangled in that? No. You're focusing on the journey. You're able to look at the horizon. You're able to take in the mountainscape. You're able to smell the forest and watch the rapids of the river and take in nature and enjoy the time with your friends and family that are in the car with you. You're not worried about when to take a left, when to take a right, when to do this, when to do that, while that incessant radio is blaring. So it's something that helps us traverse our journey, is living from the heart, okay? And these are resources. So meditation is a resource to allow me to help turn off my radio so that I can hear my GPS. That's what it is. And if I do live a more peaceful and relaxed life, that's a byproduct of it. And when things get a little stressful and something goes crazy at work or somebody reacts to me, I can rely on my meditative prowess and say, okay, if you react emotionally, then you can just rely on your meditation, like the practices that you learned, to come to center and purge the emotions and live and recenter with your heart. So I highly recommend learning a healthy meditation practice. I just so happen to have a meditation guide that's very, very inexpensive, less than the price of a cup of coffee, on Amazon Kindle and a PDF. It's on my website. I'm doing videos to help teach people how to meditate so that we can learn how to live from our heart in awareness. And there's a billion resources out there for meditation that you do not have to pay for, and they're all over the place. So go find the ones that work for you, but learn that so that you can learn how to turn off your radio and live from your heart. Another thing for me is I pray 10, 20 times a day. I have my own prayers, my own stuff, and I just talk. I have conversations to guide me, to help flush out my emotions when I feel them build up a little bit, and I can just purge them. Praying is huge. I read a ton because there are resources out there that have been around, for 5,000, 6,000 years, and all of these religious books and everything, they play their part. I always say, with advice, and whether it's reading the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, or the Antilicks, or anything that's out there, it is advice. And advice is like a market. We have our grocery list. Okay, if I have bananas and oranges and apples and almonds and chicken and kale on my list, I don't walk past the pineapples in the market and spit on them. You're not on my list, stupid. What are you doing here? No, I'm just indifferent, okay? I actually like pineapple. Mango is probably my favorite, but anywho, is that what's on our list, what speaks to us now, take that in. Use that as a resource. But if it's not for you, then just walk right by it. Maybe it will be. Maybe your taste will change in time. So with all these different things out there, these resources, if you read the Bible and the Quran, or Sufi poetry, or the Kabbalah, other mystical things, that other philosophies, and anything that's out there, if it speaks to you, then rely on that. Use that as a resource, without judgment, without assumption, with compassion, and find some things for you that work. There's a ton of them out there. There is one book I like in particular called The Untethered Soul, to help us understand the mind and how we create desire, and therefore we can kind of jump past the emotion and free ourselves of that. So that's a very good beginning resource. The Power of Now is another one. Very good book. But that is to understand kind of the mind. And then there's understanding the heart. There's reading Sufi poetry, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, all those other religious texts will help kind of understand the spirit for you. There's a ton out there. Again, it just kind of depends what speaks to you. But you can find those resources. Just have to look a little bit and see what's going to work for you, like in that market, as you peruse. And lastly, I always talk about kind of like mantras for your day, of something that you want to kind of reside with. And sometimes emotion, it's hard and it's overwhelming, and that desire for the mind. So I have a personal mantra of empathy, compassion, love. Is that if I'm with myself at a time that I need to be compassionate, empathetic, and loving, it helps me to navigate my life, not just to others, but to myself. I have to forgive who I was, because that person was doing the best they could. And with that forgiveness of myself, I will forgive others. I will forgive my circumstance and my situation now without my wife. And it's very powerful stuff. Is to be compassionate with oneself will seep into every aspect of your life in such a bold and beautiful way that it will transcend your existence in a way. But it's relishing in and embodying compassion for yourself, for others, and that will play a huge benefit in your life. So be compassionate towards yourself upon your journey. Be patient with your growth, and invest in yourself. Travel. Go experience some awesome cultures and food and other faiths and other geographic areas and beautiful sights and experiences and sounds and sensations. Volunteer. Help others. Go share your love, your blessings, your gifts with those who are less fortunate than you are, and relish within that sensation. Not within posting on social media that you did this, even though that's great too. It's the fact that you feel fulfilled, you feel sustained, you feel larger than, and you broke free of your grief. And be in nature. Go relish within God's creation. Go smell the ocean, taste the salty water, go inhale the pine forest, go through the arid hikes in the mountains and the valleys, and just ingest and take all that beauty in and let it free you from your mind, from your bubble, your existence, and have fun doing that. Find yourself, push your limitations, live life, and you may surprise yourself, but be compassionate as you go. Be empathetic towards others, because whatever trial you're navigating, they're navigating their own. And you may not be able to relate with their struggle, but you can certainly relate to struggle. So have that in your heart and learn how to turn off your mind. Invest in resources. Maybe don't watch so much TV and read a few books. Maybe not so many the online apps and games and all this stuff. I get caught up in that shit too. But kind of get rid of it for a little bit and find out what's out there and take away from these things and invest them into your life. And you'll be surprised at how many people are talking about the same thing in different capacities, in different measures. But find your resource and eat clean, go work out if you can. It's gonna always serve as a lasting foundation just to help you feel better, and you'll notice the difference. Jessica always says this, I always share this: nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. I used to own a health and wellness business with her, so I've got to touch on this or else she'll definitely strike me down. But treat yourself to that healthy life. It's going to continue to reward you time and time again, and you'll be able to invest in these other capacities that I'm speaking about now. And talk to another person, share your vulnerability, share your story, have deep conversations, help others, make eye contact, listen, hold your tongue when you're excited to share and be relevant, and just be, and pour your heart out. Allow yourself to live from that place of love. And the last mantra that always helps me and has served me well is, I like to say, I reside in God, reside in love. It's just a very liberating thought, and I really like it. So that's for me personally, is that when things got tough, I would stop and inhale and take a moment and say, reside in God, reside in love. And it always was an anchor into security of what my heart had to offer and what it was and who I am. And that is a nice, beautiful, serene place, a peaceful state to exist within, no matter what ocean of grief I was kind of swimming in and navigating. So I share that with you, and I hope it helps. And I do hope this has helped you. My heart goes out to you, those of you that are grieving, whatever burden that may be. There is help, there are resources, and you can lay that down. And the world that awaits is one that is so extremely beautiful, and it's gonna surprise you. But you can do it, and I did it, and I'm nothing, just another Joe. And it has changed my very existence. And now I am residing in love, residing in God in a constance. And it's overwhelming, and it's amazing, and it is true, true love. And I hope what I've shared with you today does help in some capacity. And I wish you a profound journey. And I'm sending my love. Thank you for watching, and journey well. This is Joe Hain. Thanks for watching.